Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kathleen McLean, Assistant Curator of Talks and Screenings here at the AGO in Toronto, and we're really happy to have you for today's talk with Ragnar Kjartansson and Adelina Vlas. Welcome, both of you. We begin by acknowledging that Toronto and the land the AGO is on is Mississauga Anishinaabe territory, Mississauga. It's also governed by a treaty between the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Canadian government. That's such a bouncy ringtone. The land has also been occupied by other Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat confederacies. So here's how today's going to go. I'll briefly introduce Ragnar and Adelina. They're going to talk about some things, including but not limited to Death is Elsewhere, the work by Ragnar that is currently installed at the AGO. Following their conversation, if time permits, Ragnar will answer some of your questions, which you can ask using the Q&A feature towards the bottom of your screen. So briefly, Ragnar Kjartansson is an Icelandic artist working in Reykjavik. His practice is performance-based and spans across installation, video, music, sculpture, painting, and drawing. He represented Iceland in the Venice Biennale in 2009 and has exhibited his work across Canada and around the world. He's known and universally admired for performances that generate emotional reactions from viewers through music, duration, and repetition. And his work makes people cry. Adelina Vlas is the Associate Curator of Contemporary Art at the AGO, where since 2014, she's organized exhibitions, including Ragnar Kjartansson's Death is Elsewhere. So with that, Adelina, Ragnar, take it away and thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and welcome Ragnar, and welcome everyone on the other side of the screens, wherever you are. We're so happy to be with you today and to share this conversation. And I always like to start by asking our guests where they are and how life has been for them over this last year. So Ragnar, where are you and how are you?
Yeah, I am here in Reykjavik, Iceland. As you can see in my two daughters' room.
We work where we can.
Sorry, yeah, it's the Zoom, you know. and this year has just been, you know, like, it has not been that dramatic here in Iceland, actually, compared to other places, I would say, because, you know, like, COVID has not been that serious, and, you know, it has been pretty contained. I mean, there's, you know, lockdown, but not that harsh a lockdown. So, I mean, restaurants have been open all the time, and you know, everybody wears some masks, and, you know, there's not parties and disco, but it's been really good for me to you know, calm down. Don't do disco every night, and yeah.
Well, we for us, it has been interesting at the AGO, of course, because we had to close and reopen and close, and we're closed again now. And I think your installation, Death is Elsewhere, and I will start sharing my screen with our audience now. This beautiful installation, Death is Elsewhere, it's currently installed in one of our galleries in Signy Eaton Gallery on the second floor, and unfortunately only had maybe a few weeks of viewership before we had to close the museum again. But we look forward to welcoming our visitors whenever the circumstances will allow it, and we will have the work on view for as long as possible into the spring of 2022, so that you know, everyone gets a chance to experience it. So we're here because of Death is Elsewhere. So if you were to, of course, there's an image on the screen, but if you were to describe this work, Ragnar, how would you describe it?
I would say it is basically a kind of kinetic musical sculpture in a way. It's a it's a circular video presentation where a couple, sort of identical couple, are always just walking in circles, singing a kind of pastoral tune about love and death, and sort of and it plays a lot with symmetrical tension, I think, and I really like symmetrical tension. I really like the works of Ronnie Horn and Bruce Nauman. This piece was sort of a Ronnie Horn meets Bruce Nauman meets Caroly Schneemann. the whole kind of it's a bit of a mashup, and the piece was shot on a summer night in Iceland, in south of Iceland, on a field, and basically it just it goes on for about an hour, and they just, you know, the song is kind of hypnotic, that it just repeats, but you don't understand, you don't recognize its beginning and ending, and it's very much sort of a kind of a piece about performance, about these musicians and these players. Like it's Gyða and Kristína Valtýsdóttir and Bryce and Aaron Dessner, and you sort of really feel their musicianship in these kind of harsh conditions with the cold and
I will.
Sorry.
That's okay. I will.
It's actually because it was actually shot on the farm, on our farm, and it seems like the farmer from the next farm is constantly calling me now, because I think there is like a kind of rain tsunami going on there now.
Wow.
I don't know what's happening. He's just constantly calling.
It's part of life.
Part of life, yeah.
Let's play a few minutes of the of Death is Elsewhere. It's just a single channel version, so I will just warn everyone that we will be looking at an empty field for a while, but then we will get to see the musicians joining in. So let's play the first video, please. what we saw is the next step of the video, and I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the location. You already mentioned that it was filmed in the middle of the Icelandic summer, but why was that particular location chosen?
Yeah, so this particular location is it's on a farm by Eldhraun, the big lava field you see there in the background. It's a lava field that came from an eruption in 1783 that just totally changed the world. It's a lava field it's the biggest lava field in history, in geological history, since humans arrived. But of course, it's very short since humans arrived. But it's just a vast lava field that it actually caused like, you know, to 1/3 of all Icelanders died because of this eruption, and millions out in the world, because it changed the weather completely. And you can even see it in paintings from this period, that you know, like the sun has a different kind of hue in it and everything, and but also, like, it caused famine in Europe, this volcanic eruption, which caused then, you know, social unrest in places like France, which caused the French Revolution. And it's just I just think it's a very interesting lava field. It's just a lava field that changed history. And it's yeah, and also it's Rococo. I always like to think of it as Rococo lava, because I really like Rococo.
Yeah,
As you can see in this piece, it's sort of there's a bit of a Watteau in it. I'm always trying to make Watteaus.
And it's like in the previous slide, you can see a little bit of the lava field right behind. I think that there is this expectation when we talk about volcanoes, that there's a lot of drama happening, and you know that from your lived experience, you have a volcano erupting in Iceland right now, and we know there's been another eruption in the Caribbean. So it looks like the earth is very active, and there's a lot of kind of the natural world is in upheaval too. And the same way the pandemic is maybe a reflection of that upheaval too, in a different way. But I think it's really significant to have that story as a backdrop for this video, that where we have the two couples singing this beautiful love song. And the musicians in this work are longtime collaborators of yours. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about your relationship with them, and about collaboration in general in your practice.
Yeah, I mean, I often find like collaboration is almost, you know, like, for me, almost art making is it's kind of connected to you stuff. and the feel of collaboration is very kind of vital in my works. Even like when I make a painting, I like always like call a friend and like, can you help me with the eyes, you know? and these people are like, Kristín and Gyða are old friends from the Reykjavik music scene, and they used to be in this band called Moom, which was kind of an electronic kind of, yeah, anechoic, kind of freaky electronic band around, you know, kind of 20 years ago. But they were very influential, and then they've become they're kind of musicians in their own right now. Like Gyða she won the Nordic Prize for music last year, and Kristín the Icelandic Music Awards, and they're like, you know, they are for her solo album, and we've collaborated on pieces like The Visitors. They're in that piece, and then I had started collaborating with Bryce and Aaron. They're from the band The National, and we made a piece called A Lot of Sorrow, which was like their band, The National, just playing that song called Sorrow for 6 hours in a concert. And after that, like a collaboration, fun stuff started happening with us, and then we sort of just sort of had this idea to make this twin band. It's sort of like ABBA with twins. That was the joke. We wrote a lot of songs, and then they made a concert, sort of almost like a vaudeville concert at this Eau Claire festival in Wisconsin. And after that, we decided to do this piece based on one of those songs we had written in the songwriting sessions, which just took place here in my house. Actually, yeah. So just the it was just like this song is all just like the lyrics are just picked out from titles of books in the bookshelves and some poems which were just lying inside of books in the bookshelf. So it sort of was like that, like Aaron and Bryce are kind of like these songwriting machines, and they just like brought these guitar riffs, and me and Gyða and Kristín, we were just like in the bookshelves, just like finding lyrics and making it up as we went. And so like this lyric is a collage of Anne Carson's translation of Sappho, and the title of Alexander Dumbadze's book about Bashar Nader, and then Robert Luck's poetry. That's his poetry is sort of the kind of the main part of this. By the stream, my love, sort of a kind of Fluxus poem playing with the idea of a love poem. Really like that. Yeah.
And
this songwriting was totally a collaboration between the five of us, and then shooting this video was also, as you can see from those pictures, it was just like very beautiful collaborative momentum we had there.
And it was quite an impressive. We have some images from the production and the set, so to say, and it's kind of impressive to see what went into it. And is this one of your most ambitious projects to date in terms of the production quality? And
yeah, it was a very kind of technically crazy, complicated thing. It was also shot there in the south of Iceland, and we were based on this farm which has no like the electricity is just from like a natural water power plant that was just built for the farm in 1920s, which creates really little electricity. So like all the equipment we had was actually run from that tiny little stream electricity. And because we couldn't, you couldn't use like an electric generator because that would destroy the sound of it. And yeah, it's a very kind of, I always like that you do something that's crazy technical. And I worked with my collaborator Thomas Thomasson and Chris McDonald on it to find solution to do this. But then I really like that the piece is just so simple and it's in how it feels. It's like I always like it. You use a lot of effort to make something that just feels effortless. It's a sort of the kind of the idea of the ballerina. You just have a horrible, torturous life to move like air.
It looks so easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how did you arrive at the 77-minute kind of mark? Because obviously it's the same song repeated again and again and again for 77 minutes. So how did you decide that was the length of this work?
I just decided that the length should be circa about an hour because we just started like half an hour before midnight, and I wanted to go, like, because it's like, it's just this magical moment on midnights in the summer in Iceland where they're like, there is no darkness, but the birds fall asleep for 1 hour, circa about. And you can actually hear it in the video, like in the beginning and then in the end, you hear birds. So, like we started when the birds were falling asleep. And then when I started hearing birds again, I realized we should stop. And also I just, they were just going on, and I could really see how ridiculously hard it was for Aaron and Bryce to pick on the guitar in the cold. It's really cold. I mean, yeah, it's always, as you can see on this picture, like, we needed brandy just to like, to be able to do this.
Brandy.
Yeah.
Amazing. And speaking of endurance, obviously, there is this aspect to the work, right? That the performers are really having to put on this feat of endurance, right? To realize the work, and it kind of all stems from you. And here you mentioned A Lot of Sorrow, your project with the National, that was recorded in May of 2013 in collaboration with MoMA PS1 in New York, where you asked the band to perform a song that was 3.5 minutes long, but for 6 hours. So what was that experience like in terms of the ask you made of your collaborators, and how did they take that on?
They took it, I mean, I started doing these pieces like of, creating durational pieces, and when you would like repeat something forever, that because I started doing that stuff myself. And then I realized it's really nice to do it, because it's, you move away from like your thoughts and your life. It's basically the essence of all religious practice in a way, just to repeat something for a really long time, and then you reach God in ecstasy. and so therefore I started like asking other people to do projects, and then I just had this idea of like asking the National. I didn't know them personally at all. I just sent them an email, and they just were like, okay, let's do it. And the only one who was hesitant, understandably, was Brian, the drummer, because he has to be like,
for 6 hours.
like, yeah. So like, I mean, so his part in it was like insanely hard. But he took it on, and they all just they just really knew what they were gonna do, and they just really thoroughly enjoyed it, which was beautiful. It was really like it was such a pleasurable experience and that's also, I think, why kind of this friendship was born out of this, that like we all had the blast.
That's amazing. And you decided in advance that he was going to stop at the 6-hour mark, or was that something that again evolved when you felt like that was the moment to stop?
No, just 6 hours just looks cool on the clock, from 12 to 6.
And yeah, kind of the and what was the response of the audience? Was the audience going in and out, or was the demand on the audience to be there for the 6 hours?
We had a little bit of space in the back where people could just go in and out, so that but then you could go into sort of almost like the pit in front of the stage, and there you could just stay, and apparently a lot of people just stayed for the whole time, which was just very amazing. So the audience was really in this performance with the band, and you really feel that in the video. You like when Siggy and Stefan started editing it, they were like, it's always the same people. It's strange. Like, I didn't really notice on the day, but you somehow see like it's the same people there in the front.
The extreme listeners.
Yeah, totally extreme listeners. And I think it's something, there was some kind of you know, uh, momentum or something that happened. But it was, it was on a Saturday, and people just decided, I'm just gonna, take this Saturday and just, enjoy this. Or I think also just the band lured them in.
Yeah.
You kind of, it's something it's kind of hard to stop watching.
Yeah. They have quite a way of kind of mesmerizing.
Yeah.
No, that is, and also what's interesting is that there is a recording of the 6-hour long performance, right? So you can actually buy the record and listen to the 6 hours.
Yeah, it was really cool. We actually it was released on vinyl.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful
limited edition. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I think it's like 10 vinyls or something that are in the package, and it's just that concert. It's I think it's a pretty cool concert album.
Again, for the extreme listeners.
Yeah. Or also just like it's just Brian and Matt, Brian the bass player, and no, Scott the bass player, and Matt the singer. They designed it together. They're actually like and Scott the bass player is a great graphic designer.
Amazing.
And it's just sort of just like a see-through box.
Yeah.
Like all the vinyls are sort of see-through vinyls, and the box is this kind of plexi box, plastic. So it's very sculptural. I think you have it there and just it contains this music, but it's almost just like a sculpture of the music. I was really happy I didn't touch the design of it. They were like they did a gorgeous job.
A byproduct.
Yeah.
But speaking of your relationship with the National, I have to get my slideshow to work. Okay, there we go. In 2017, so 4 years later, the tables were a little bit turned, and you were part of their gig, so to say. And you mentioned this festival in Copenhagen. So can you talk to us a little bit about I'll Destroy You, which exists now as a music video, and we can put a link in the chat room for our viewers. We will not play this video, but can you talk a little bit? And I have some stills that I'm going to share, but tell us what's going on here and how did this come about?
Yeah, I'll Still Destroy You was it's almost a documentation of this installation performance which was done at this Haven Festival in Copenhagen, which Aron Dessner moved with his wife Stine, who is Danish. They were like living in Copenhagen at the time, and Aron is such a he just had to do something in Copenhagen, so he just created a music festival in the docks there, which was a totally fantastic music festival. And he asked me to do something there, and one thing led to another that me and the group of friends, we changed it's almost like a container, just like it was kind of a house that was just used. It's a house that is used for welding of boats and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we just changed that. We just built a set inside that house just for the few days of the festival, where we changed it into a sleazy Danish strip club. And I was and I basically fulfilled my dream of being kind of a professional stripper, and I was just stripping there for a weekend, and then Kristina and Geda, and they were playing music to my stripping, and then the National also played there, and we did that video almost just to document this weird joint, and it was a pretty cool experience. And this bar was called Dope and Corruption. Let's not forget that.
And it slowly kind of it starts very as the slideshow illustrated. It starts very kind of calm and contained, and then it kind of increasingly gets a little bit out of hand. with champagne and confetti being thrown around. So it's kind of an increasingly crazy atmosphere in there.
Yeah, actually was like that, and it isn't included in the video, but like, at the end of the video shoot, like us all were thrown out of the place because the security, something like, there were too many of us inside and something, so the security had to throw us all out. And I remember I was just like, in my golden stripper underwear, just like out in the mud in the rain in some Danish music festival, which was pretty perfect.
Yes. So I'll encourage our viewers to check that out after this. But,
and it's a gorgeous song. It's just like a crazy good song. So, although it's a silly video, it's a really, really good song.
Yeah. And you as performer is something that actually it's quite common in your practice. It's not part of Death is Elsewhere, but you have been very much in most of your works, with a few exceptions. And I want to mention a little bit of our history, your history with the AGO, that in 2015, we invited you to do a performance in the Walker Court, and it was titled An Evening of Misery. And for an hour or so, you and your other well-known collaborator, David Foy Jansen, performed a number of songs that were kind of eclectically selected from both classical repertoire and popular culture. So can you tell us a little bit about your memories of that evening that also ended with a bit of a striptease act?
Yeah, it always ends up with striptease, I'm sorry. It's just so, but it just like me and Tabitha, we've collaborated a lot on all kinds of artworks, but with the this Evening of Misery, we just wanted, to do kind of just performance of really gorgeous, miserable songs, which were mainly kind of lieder and country music. Mm-hmm. And just sort of like kind of sink into the darkness. And we just, we rehearsed a lot in just, and sort of created the program, in the city before the concert. And then it was just awesome to do it. And the audience they were very friendly to the silly thing, because I somehow often think, like it's important to do, like sometimes to do performances. This was just a music performance. This wasn't really performance. There was nothing kind of performance art about it. It was just like we were doing a concert of great songs.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is it's sort of important for me. I really like doing concerts and just songs in general. I'm just I'm a total sponge for music. I just need music constantly and to listen to it and feel it, and then also there's the kick of performing music and other people's music. Is just great when you sing a song by somebody, you just like feel that somebody, dead or alive, inside you when you're singing it. I really like that feeling.
Yeah, and I have to say that a lot of your work, when you do perform in your work, the music is always there, so that's kind of a given. But it's also music that talks about the darker side of our human experience, or maybe it's not even the darker side, it's just that the sadder side of our human experience, right? There is misery and sorrow and death, but then I think that there's also love, right? And if with Death is Elsewhere, it's kind of how I see it. I think that it's a love song, but the title is suggestive of something else. So why can you talk about your insistence on kind of looking at that sorrowful and mournful aspect of our experience?
I mean, there are, I could give you like a really elegant kind of conceptual answer, but I think it's just like that I was really into The Cure when I was a teenager. I think it's just, you know, the result of listening too much to The Cure. And I even remember there was like a quote to a Shelley poem on the album Wish, which is, I don't remember the quote exactly, but it's something that, you know, like in the, like kind of that happiness exists in the saddest of songs. That, you know, like it is the sad song that makes us happy. I mean, you know the feeling. It's like you listen to When I Kissed the Teacher with ABBA, you know, it doesn't really make you happy, but when you listen to The Winner Takes It All with ABBA, it makes you happy, because like the emotional brutality of it, it somehow soothes you. It's weird. There's something really soothing about sad songs, and maybe it's just like the melancholia. It's not like because I mean there's a huge difference between melancholia and depression, and like, and you know, this idea that melancholia is the joy of being sad. And yeah, that's very kind of very much in a song like the National Sorrow. It's, you know, like it's in my, you know, sorrow found me when I was young, sorrow waited, sorrow won, and then sorrow, they put me on the pill, I don't want to get over you, and blah blah blah. And then it goes like it's sorrow is in my honey, sorrow is in my milk. I really like that phrase. That's really sort of like, yeah, kind of sums it all up. It's in my honey and it's in my milk.
But speaking of you as a musician and music maker, here's we're going to end the conversation by mentioning this particular moment where you're part of a band, Trabant, and this song is called The One. Can you tell us a little bit about Trabant?
Yeah, Trabant is a kind of pop group I was in from like from 1999, and think we somehow kind of faded out around 2007-8 and it was just, you know, group of friends in Reykjavik from the music scene, and we started out as kind of very experimental electronic, and then we started doubling with making pop song, and like with this one called The One, we just, you know, went overboard with creating a pop song. And we really were we you know, we totally enjoyed playing live, and it was a very much kind of live experience band. It was sort of, you know, of the electro clash of that time, kind of electro rock and roll, you know, sort of mayhem, a lot of glitter, you know, shaking tits and shaking my tits and that kind of stuff.
We would like to play it. We've had some difficulties when we were trying it out before, but I think we're going to try to play it. And if it doesn't work, we'll just stop and we will turn over to the Q&A, and we can talk more about music and love and death and all that.
Yeah.
So here we go. Let's see if we can get the one to play. That was great.
Pop, 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 pop.
So I would like to ask my colleague Kathleen to rejoin us and help us a little bit with the Q&A. I see there's some questions coming from our audience.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting us share that video. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So it's so nice to bring it to a broader audience. Yeah, there's lots of questions, but one maybe we could start with is just specifically about music. Sam Bailey wonders, Ragnar, what music are you listening to lately? Have you rediscovered anything over the past year? And are there any new bands in Iceland we should know about?
Oh man, I'm like just lately I've been, I just listen a lot to music, and have been discovering some. I've just been, I've been really just into like mainstream pop recently. I've just really listening a lot to like, to Cardi B and Dua Lipa and and Justin Bieber, and I think because I'm and of course The Weeknd. Here's to you Canadians for The Weeknd.
Thank you.
No, I'm just really excited about pop nowadays. I think like there's some kind of a really golden age of pop happening.
Yeah, well, I think also when pop delivers something that we might find particularly useful in this moment. And then I have a question. I know you were in Trabant.
It delivers, and also it's just like, and it also like kind of, I mean, like The Weeknd, it's just totally nihilism for the masses. It's just like, it's really depressing, but it's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's a nice combo. And with Trabant was one of the bands that you were in, but you were in some before that too, right? And
I was actually in a band called Canada.
Tell us more.
It was sort of it was a metal kind of metal electro circus mayhem band. It was just like mayhem, and it was called Canada with a K.
That I was going to ask that distinction is probably important.
Because like in Iceland we write Canada with a K. Yeah, so it was because like we couldn't find an identity for the band, and then we just thought like Canada is a good name. Like nobody knows what the identity of Canada is.
Fair.
Which is great, but it has this blurry identity. That's like that's what we were looking for as a musically. And then I was also in a boy band called Cozy, which was like when I was a teenager. But it was sort of just like a kind of high school band, and a country band called The Funerals. And
just
all this has been, yeah.
I was just going to say, Funerals just seems like kind of a perfect name for a country band, given the tenor of some of the songs. And it kind of feels like your work now is like, it's deeply collaborative. You're working with a lot of musicians, but I wanted to ask, is it more fun because you get to be the boss of things, whereas maybe a band needs to be ever so slightly more democratic?
Yeah, I mean, you could have, I mean, it's like yeah, I mean, I really like being in bands and being in this kind of democratic environment where you kind of are throwing ideas and having arguments and drama and that kind of thing. And of course like when something is like one's own work, like, can you join for this piece? Then you are sort of the boss. And I mean, you need to be the boss. I mean, like when somebody asks me to join for a project of theirs, I want them to tell me what to do. It just like, it's just like it's almost but I think in doing my kind of stuff which are my works, I've learned so much from band work that you listen to others and kind of, I mean, a band is so much about making everyone shine who is in the group, and that's what you try to do when you make artworks, also with a collaborative, essence. Is that, like, if it's just about you, me, and my ideas and then you kind of kill. Then the work is then just like you kill the work. So it is a kind of delicate balance, I would say.
Okay, someone has asked, what do your daughters think of the version of you in your work, stripper included?
I mean, my 2-year-old, she's somewhat just like, she's not that interested. But my 10-year-old, she just thinks it's cute and funny. She has a lot of sympathy for her father.
That's good. Okay, we've got some questions about Death is Elsewhere and your work in general. There's a question around like the process of creating the work. Is it one take? How many takes? What would a typical shooting thing look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a few takes, but there's like, I mean, it's like Death is Elsewhere is a really good example. It's like we did many takes of it, on a few. I think we did 4 nights. But of course, I ended up then I had this costume that they were wearing and whatnot, so that they were totally identical in the circle. But of course, I ended up with just using the rehearsal take from the first night.
Mm.
Yeah, and because that had the kind of spontaneous, easygoing feel. It's just this, it's just this very. I always fuck things up when I'm forcing it, like when you're trying to stylize it, and things are just great when they are accidentally great. Yeah.
And someone else on the same work, Death is Elsewhere, wonders, because there's no audience like a lot of other pieces, did that change the energy of creating that work?
I mean, there of course was like an audience. It was just like us, the camera crew, inside the ring. So I think they were aware of us, but it totally changed the nature. I think is a really good point, because we weren't really an audience. They were just like there. So I think it's even, they are sort of, there's kind of a private thing to it, I think. And because also like there's no audience, and then they're just kind of them against the weather. So you forget about like being a fabulous musician. You're just like, I'm just trying to get through this,
Trying not to die. Okay, so someone asks about the collaborative work that you've done with your mom, that you redo every 5 years. They want to know, how is your mother doing, and do you have another version of that work planned?
Well, that is a sweet question. Yeah, my mom is doing fine. She's now 85, going on 86, and we did a version last year. So, so the next version will be, when she's 90. That will be in 225. So yeah, I just hope we both survive to 225, and yeah, it's a nice Trump family tradition. Keeps us going.
And here's the question, just from my own curiosity, when a new edition, like if that work is acquired somewhere, when a new edition is created, does that go to the existing work? Like if it lived in a museum, would they get the newest one all the time?
It's a very good question. And I think I have this thing that I just totally trust my galleries to make the make the deals, because like, yeah, I'm a very bad person about talking about the, because I just have these great galleries, and I just like, and I love them and trust them, and I know they're doing the best thing with this.
Good plan. Okay, so maybe because we're almost at time, a viewer asks, because she saw the artist diary you did with the Hirshhorn, where you talked about, hopefully it was early in the pandemic, and you talked about hopefully having a spiritual awakening. So she's just wondering, now that we're a year in, how's that going?
Actually, wow. Well, that would be, I was just thinking about it, because I was starting to work on that in, I call it a spiritual awakening, but it's more kind of, I guess, like moral awakening or something, or trying to, not be less of a egocentric, narcissistic son of a bitch, and become but use the because there's like actually it's going pretty good. I think I'm becoming more this year has really kind of made me look at myself in the mirror and deal with really difficult, tough things, but I feel really much better, and I think everyone around me feels better. That was a deep question. Thank you.
Yes, it's a good update. Well, Ragnar, thank you so much for joining us today, and Adelina for framing the conversation. It was really great to connect with you and enjoy the volcano.
Yeah, we almost get a new crater every day now. It's just like getting bigger and bigger. It's like Mordor up there.
Well, at least it offers some distraction. We're stuck at home, and this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Ragnar, for making the time to talk to us. And we invite our visitors to come back whenever we reopen to experience Deaths Elsewhere in person.
Thank you for the talk. It was a great honor, and it was very great to see you. And thank you all folks for coming.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.